from just outside the Empire City at the crossroads to the northeast. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Wherever you are and whenever you are, this is your premier podcast for all things unknown, not media, and I'm your host, JP. Welcome to Not Media. This is episode 20, and time flies when you're talking about UFOs, ghosts, serial killers, all that good, strange stuff going on in this world. So tonight's guest, I appreciate for having him letting me speak to him on this Easter evening. So his name is Paul Bachett. Paul G. Bachett is an author whose speculative fiction bridges U.S. government cover-ups, extraterrestrial phenomena, spirituality, and the future of humanity. Through his writing, Paul encourages readers to explore hidden truths and imagine new realities. A U.S. government civilian and former U.S. Air Force civil engineering officer, Paul draws from real-life experiences in his novel, The Disclosure Paradox. Inspired by transformative meditation experiences in 2009, the novel incorporates elements of Paul's personal journey, including the discovery of a hidden underground space at a large secret military facility, into his storytelling. The Disclosure Paradox has garnered high praise on Amazon and Goodreads, with its revised February 2025 edition offering readers a thought-provoking exploration of discovery and intrigue. Born in Italy, Paul immigrated to the United States as a child, where his life was shaped by a rich blend of cultural influences and professional accomplishments. After earning a Bachelor of Architecture degree from University of Illinois, Chicago, he served as a civil engineering officer in the United States Air Force. His assignments across Washington, the Azores, Ohio, and Japan informed both his professional expertise and globally reflective perspective. For more information about Paul G. Bachett and the Disclosure Paradox, you can visit thedisclosureparadox.com. Thank you for coming on this evening, Paul. How are you doing this evening?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Great. First off, I want to say thank you for your service to this country. I know, it looks like you said, was it 14 years that you served? I'm going to go back here. I saw
13.
I think I listened to your other interviews. I kind of, when I was kind of just looking you up and looking about some of your life history. How many years does it say here? How many years you actually served, or how many years did you serve?
It was 13, and
13.
Another 13 with the Army.
That's awesome, man. Thank you very much. That's a lifetime of service to this country, and I always thank people. It's always good on the bigger picture of things, just in life. When you look at the type of life we can be living, we could either be living. I look at it like this: we're living a life all about us and all about our carnal desires and our wants and our needs, or we take the higher road, which often is not the easier road, which is living a life of service, which is putting yourself out there, putting your safety and just sacrificing your time and well-being for the well-being and order of and protection of others. So again, thank you very much for your service. So just before we get into your book, it seems like you probably had quite a quite an experience working so you said you worked first for U.S. Air Force Civil Engineering Office, and then you said you put another 13 years in the Army, you said afterwards?
Yeah, so I was 13 years in service. I left in 95. I had 16 years outside, and then I joined the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers in 2012, where I am right now.
Oh, wow. So you're still there, actually. Wow. Look at that. And the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, is that
right?
Is that considered? Would that be considered a military job, or is it more like on the civilian side of being in the military? How would you classify that?
Yeah, I'm an Army civilian.
Okay. So basically, you're still in the Army, but you're serving as a civilian. and in that job function right now, what are you responsible for in your current function?
I manage the design of facilities in the Middle East right now.
Oh, great! Wow. So that sounds pretty involved. Is that something that you went to school for while in the military, or something you went to school for before the military?
Well, you have to be an architect to do what I'm doing. So I've got my architectural degree. I'm licensed. You have to be licensed to do what I'm doing because you supervise other firms' work. And so that's what I am, a design manager.
Okay, great. So I'm sure that, there's probably a lot of stuff that you can't talk about that you're involved in doing out there, but it sounds like you're, whatever it is that you oversee some pretty important things as far as the structures, I would imagine, of different facilities that they might be working on, facilities that they might be building. And like I said, I'm sure at some level that you probably aren't clear to speak about exactly what you're doing. So I don't want to, if you're not at liberty to speak about it, but, is that like along the lines of pretty much what you're doing out there?
The facilities that I'm working on are not U.S. Air Force, U.S. facilities. They're for a host nation.
Okay,
so
got it.
We've got a lot of projects that are called foreign military sales, which are facilities that support the sales of weapon systems to other countries. So if we sell them, ships, or then we do harbors. If we sell them planes, then we do hangars and all the other facilities.
Yeah. Wow. So that seems some pretty high level stuff in any event. And then prior to that, it sounds like U.S. Air Force Civil Engineering Officer. Is that something similar? Was that a similar job function for the Air Force?
Yeah, it involved using my architectural background in various manner, doing programming for facilities, construction management in some cases, or just doing design for projects that dealt with repair and remodeling of existing facilities on the bases. Okay.
Oh, wow. So again, a very much needed function, and it sounds like a very high level function for you. And I'm sure your work is very appreciated, the time that you've put in. Now, before we start getting into, let's see, it says, just from your bio that based on an experience that you had with meditation, this is this what shifted your before this experience in 2009? Was there anything that you've either experienced in life that led you into like anything with the unknown or anything like that? Like, were you somebody, let's say prior to 2009, who was like highly skeptical about anything in the genre of the unknown, or is this something that you've experienced prior in your life that had you led you to have an open mind about what may be going on in this world when it comes to certain topics that aren't currently discussed on normal mainstream media, and or is it this experience in 2009 that kind of shifted you over?
I would say that over the years, starting with just being a young boy, learning or being taught Catholicism, it was a journey, an evolutional journey that involved spirituality, and then involved critical thinking. And so if you combine my critical thinking skills that I got when I was younger, skeptical about what I was being taught, looking for other things that interest me, that seem more real, like the space program or reading about science fiction. That's what kind of got me on that track. The one event that occurred while I was in the Air Force, where I discovered a hidden basement in a facility that was a highly secure facility, that I learned that held a large cryogenic chamber, that was a key point in my development, as far as, my skepticism and being curious about things that, were not being told.
Yeah.
And what happened was that learning stuff that on, for instance, the ancient aliens, that I recall about learning about the Book of Ezekiel, for example, when I was in high school. There was a show about that in Ancient Aliens, and it kind of jogged my memory about that, and then what happened with the Air Force. And I combined the two, and I started to get not only more curious, but active and seeking out individuals that have had experiences with extraterrestrials. It started out with just trying to learn about things that we're not being told about, that people would say conspiracy theories. For example, big pharma, the search for alternative energy systems that was being suppressed. All of that combined into finding these people that I eventually learned had more to tell than just what I was asking them. And when I learned about their experiences, and I reasoned what happened to me in the Air Force, I felt that I needed to develop this better. And what I also learned is that a common thing among all these people is that they were spiritual and that they practiced meditation. So once I took that up, that's when things started to really happen to me.
Okay. So take me, before we start getting more into that, take me back to, well, I guess we'll go way back. Is it like, as far as what you were learning, being, because I went to Catholic school too, and like, I kind of, and I read your book, so I kind of know that it's kind of like semi-auto, even though the story, like the entire story is not true, it's semi-autobiographical. So like the
Correct.
part that the character Lewis, when they talk about his childhood, and they talk about like how very dogmatic certain aspects of being raised in not only a faith of, like, let's say like a Roman Catholic faith, but going to Catholic school is another level, because I remember, I didn't go my entire life. I think I stopped going in, I think, second grade, up till second grade. But I remember, like, you're barely processing, like, like you're barely able to like grasp the concepts of like going outside and like playing like with your friends, and like, just like getting involved, like young males getting involved in like stuff that young guys do, riding bikes and building forts in the woods and stuff like that. Like, that's the sort of stuff that you're into when you're like, whatever it is, what is it, like 9-10 years old. And then they start talking about like, like resurrection and suffering and like this and that. Like, I just think they're concepts that just might go over the heads of like a lot of kids. And I think even though like the kids pretty much just get like browbeaten with this, like from an age, I'm not sure if they're quite ready to be receptive to something like that at such a young age, such a serious topic. Like we withhold like other sorts of things from children up until certain ages. So I'm not sure, like looking back, like on my own life, like it just seemed like I probably was just clueless to a lot about what's being taught to me in Catholic school. You go there, you put the uniform on, you say your basic prayers because everybody else says them. It's almost kind of like you're going through a routine just because you're told to go through a routine. You're not told to think about it. You're not told to question it. Does it have to do something with that?
Right.
Because I know like the character kind of got a little fed up with like maybe just the suffering, like like it almost seemed like certain aspects of her like unneeded suffering. Like there was like some story that a nun told him about a woman being told she had beautiful eyes, and she like gouged her eyes out because it was considered like a righteous thing to do because she was beyond being able to look good, because that was like somehow a sin to God, her looking good, so like, is it like stuff like that, as far as just kind of getting browbeaten with all that stuff?
Yeah. As I, write in the book, as you mentioned, the book is semi-autobiographical, and I guide the reader through the process of how I developed the belief system. And you're right. I feel that the children that age, it's difficult for them to grasp concepts that are told to them but not explained. Like for instance, virginity. At that young age.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm 100% with you. We're not even talking about like that's a topic that's off limits until kids that are at least, like, I'd say, I don't know, maybe around the age of puberty. So like you're talking to kids that are like pre-pubescent about virginity. It's a concept they're not active in, they're not thinking about. So to be able to like start talking like with this, like very serious tone about virginity and what it means, like it's just beyond I think it's beyond the scope of what a 8 or 9-year-old really can kind of grasp or like really kind of ponder.
Yeah.
It's just, it's just kind of like, it's like, you start teaching like a 10 or 11-year-old about like advanced physics or something like that. I'm sure there's a small handful of them that might be able to grapple with it, but I'd say the majority of students at that age are probably, it's just going to go right over their heads, just beyond the scope of what they can handle. So, okay. And then like that led to you questioning, maybe being someone who questions things and wants to know a little
Sure.
bit, know, have a reason to why. If there's like, science, for example, like you said, you were into the space program, I've always been fascinated with stuff like that also, like there's always like, that's kind of one of the things I liked about at least certain aspects of science is that there's an answer, there's a question and there's an answer, and then there's a path of how you got to that answer. And it's always very, very laid out in a way that could be concise and complete. And, and even if you break it down to someone who's maybe not as technically like a layman, you could still probably get someone there, like get someone to like the facts of how certain things work in life,
Right. Yeah.
So, like I recently read a book about Winston Churchill, and they were saying that like even though he wasn't grappling at a advanced level of physics, like when they explained to him the atom bomb, he was able to at least conceptually understand at some level how it works, if not knowing exactly how atoms fall apart, this and that. But so and now let's get back into now this part where you come into meditation. Was there an event particularly that led you to meditation? Because I know just in my life, I learned meditation when I got my bachelor's degree at a school in Westchester at Purchase College. They had a meditation room. And before that, I'd never been exposed to meditation. So literally one day the teacher's like, I think I was taking a health psychology class a couple of years back. And they were like, yeah, we're going to go take a walk to a meditation center. And at the time I was just like, oh man, really? I was like rolling my eyes the whole way there. I'm like, this has got to be like the corniest, I can't believe we're actually spending school. We walk into this room, there's carpets on the walls. And I'm like, oh man, it's just keeps getting better. So I'm like, I was just ready to like laugh the whole thing off. And then I was like, all right, so I'm going to be stuck here for 20 minutes, a half hour anyway. I might as well just like rock with whatever they're saying to do. And I noticed like on the way home from school that day, I was commuting over the bridge down by the Tappan Zee, or they call it either the Marriott or the Tappan Zee Bridge over there and outside of New York City. Normally it's bumper to bumper traffic. Normally you're tired, you're stressed out, anything just wants to set you off and you want to just start screaming, and like I realized like the whole ride home, I'm like, I don't know, like something seems very peaceful about this ride home, and it shouldn't be. And then something clicked in my head, like, wow, it had to be that meditation, because I haven't done anything different. It was like every day. So, and then recently I had a injury when I was boxing. So I got back into meditation within the past year, and I had a torn bicep, and, I tripled down on my meditation. So I've now been trying to meditate, I don't know, maybe about half hour, 45 minutes a day. And I find it very beneficial. I mean, I don't know. I just kind of follow some app that does guided meditation. I haven't really taken any classes or anything, but I find it very beneficial. Was there something in your life that led you to the path of meditation?
Only talking to the individuals and then learning actually from an experiencer. His name was Robert Dean. And he's passed away, but he was a famous experiencer. He was interviewed many times on various shows and podcasts. And he was, I guess, given the role of a contactee because of his psychic abilities, because the extraterrestrials communicated with him telepathically. So when I learned that he advocated meditation, and how he mentioned that it opens up a gift inside of us that we need to open up. Everyone has it, but no one takes advantage of it. I decided to become, I guess, more disciplined on it, and really focus on what he was telling people to do, and I got real good at it. 45 minutes every evening doing it.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
That's real. And for those folks and for those folks at home that don't know, meditation, I mean, if I could sum it up as quickly as possible without getting too much into it, pretty much slows your brainwave patterns down. And a lot of people who I talk to that don't meditate are always like, well, I think too much and I don't meditate. And I say it like this. That is like saying I'm out of shape and I don't go to the gym because I'm out of shape. It's the same principle. Well, it's like, well, get this. You actually have to go to the gym. And then after like a few weeks of doing it, you get a little bit more in shape, and then you step your patterns up and your routines up. And it's kind of like that with meditation. You don't have to have any special gift. It's not something that you need to be like great and focused to do it. It's that the more you do it, the better, the easier it gets to slow your brainwave patterns down. I think it kind of just opens up a little space in your head and allows you to kind of be in touch with a little bit more things that are under the surface and going on in your life that might not be so apparent if you're constantly on those very high frequency brainwaves that are like, text the next person, to the grocery store, to school, to the next bill, to the next stress. And like a lot of our brains are operating up here, especially in the day of social media. And meditation kind of brings that brainwave pattern down to a lower level. And the more you do it, I think the better off you get at it, like Paul is saying, And so, Paul, was there an experience during meditation, like one experience, or was it after you started meditating, was it just a feeling that you got, or was it like one experience that like opened you up one day and you said, wow, I just had an experience, or what was it?
It was slow. It started out, I began in 2009, and once I began, I was experiencing what people call synchronicities, and that's like when people say that they experience deja vu.
Yeah.
Well, those are synchronicities. Those are signs that you are on the right path. It's an affirmation that your life is on track. Okay, so I had a lot of that, and just a lot of what people would say are coincidences happening that worked their way into me writing about things and learning about the things that I needed to write about. For example, one of the things that happened to me is I met a woman whose mother was CIA, and before she passed away, the mother gave her documents about the things that I write about in the book, about Dulce, about autopsies of extraterrestrials, and most importantly, I have the briefing document from the Truman administration to the Eisenhower administration on the establishment of Majestic 12, MJ12. So if it wasn't for her, and it was like a coincidence of meeting her, if it wasn't for her giving me the documents, I wouldn't have had a lot of the ammunition to put together to put in this book, a lot of the truths.
Okay.
So
just real quick, just to let people at home know, I think it was you said it was the Truman administration for
right.
Those that don't know, MJ12. I learned about MJ12. I did a pretty extensive paper about the Roswell crash, and I've done I think I did like a 2 or 3 hour podcast. I think it was episode 2 or 3. I went over a lot of that information. So I read just a ton of information on what happened at Roswell. How many crashes, where the parts were taken, how many bodies, the people, the names, the death threats. We just went through it all. But MJ12 was like an ad hoc group of at the time, the president was like, we're not going to tell the public about this, and it's just too much, too soon. World War II just happened. There's just been too much insanity in this world, and we don't know what to tell the public. We don't even know ourselves. So they pretty much said, we're going to assemble a team of the best and the brightest people from all over. We're going to find the best scientists, the best people in the military, some of the most competent minds that we could find currently right now. That's why it's called 12. There's 12 of them. We're going to put them together in a group, and we're going to let them be an ad hoc group of like a council that figures out how to handle this extraterrestrial problem, or at the time, before the knowledge of terrestrials, which is what we're going to kind of get a little bit into next, is that, they're going to handle this. They're going to figure out how to handle the press. They're going to figure out how to handle the public. They're going to figure out how to do the media, the blackout, everything, And so that's what MJ12 is. And it's been very heavily debated. I know I got a chance to meet Stan Friedman before he passed away. And he wrote he actually wrote a book on, I think it was called Top Secret Magic 12. This has been a heavily debated topic throughout the UFO community for a long time. MJ12 is real. MJ12 is a hoax. But I think the people that really, really start peeling the layers back and looking into MJ12, especially now with a lot of these revelations coming out, that the group was real, that they did indeed put together a group like that. As to what that morphed into over the decades, what sort of amalgamation, maybe not the original MJ12, more than likely that dissolved, but other groups similar to that probably popped up and spread out in a very nebulous manner, and were probably absorbed through and into the military industrial complex and private sector afterwards. So this was a big turning point for you then, meeting this person whose mother was in the CIA.
Right. It was just one of the major points on the timeline, but yeah, it was significant.
So now, before we move forward into the book and we start getting into that, I'm sure this was probably somewhere around the point in your life where you started maybe considering this, reconsidering maybe this event that you had. You said there was one event that you had when you were working. Was it at the time for the Air Force as a civil engineering officer, when you went to a Air Force base? Right. Are you at liberty to speak about what Air Force base that this was? Are you allowed to talk about that, or?
No, it was at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base.
Okay.
The facility was Foreign Technology Division.
Okay.
If you search Foreign Technology Division, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, you won't find any information on it because it never existed.
Yes.
In fact, the facility is gone. It's been demolished sometime in the 90s, maybe. I'm not sure when exactly it was demolished, but there's a parking lot right now where that facility is. But originally, that facility was set up to research weapon systems from foreign governments, looking at their strengths, their weaknesses, opportunities that we can take on their weaknesses, and just looking at the overall weapon systems. And then they would take that information across the highway, which is where our research and development facilities are for the Air Force, which is Aeronautical Systems Division. And there they would take the information and come up with ideas on either improving our existing weapon systems or making new weapon systems to counter a certain threat.
Okay.
So
sounds very practical. Sounds very. Yeah. Okay.
It was,
and then you came, and then again, for folks at home, if you're not familiar, I've came across this reference too when I read the book Day After Roswell. Philip Corso, I think he was a retired at the time he wrote this book. He was a retired colonel. He worked under, I believe at some point he was I think under General Trudeau, but somewhere in the 1950s, I believe, he came across a job function where he worked at the foreign tech, or at least per his book, this is the information that came forward in his book, that he worked, and pertaining to whatever the wreckage was at Roswell, he somehow found himself in a room in a back office somewhere in Foreign Technology Division with a filing cabinet with pieces of this spaceship that were basically brought to private industry, and then a cover story was invented, and this was kind of how they tried to develop this technology. So this is very well known if you've read a couple books about Roswell and some of the big, like, big name books that Foreign Technology Division, like I said, if Paul's stating that it doesn't exist on the records, well, it's very well been written about before, the Foreign Technology Division, so just for some backing on that. And from there, when you saw, what was it? What did you see? You said you saw something on some blueprints, or you saw something about a facility. What exactly about that facility was what kind of set an alarm bell off for you?
Yeah, I was a construction manager, and my project was on the second floor. The building itself is surrounded by motion detectors, and even if you have a top secret clearance, you were escorted around the facility. When you got into the building, there were no directories, no numbers on the doors, no names on the doors. Everything was white. Individuals that worked in one building, one part of the building, didn't know what was going on in the other part, which is compartmentation. Anyway, my project was on the second floor. My escort took me there, and it was all gutted. I was there to inspect the condition of the facility to make sure that it matched the drawings, the existing drawings prior to construction. So I was going through the existing drawings, and they're called as-built. And thumbing through the drawing, I noticed that there was a floor plan for a basement. Now, this was a renovated warehouse, a two-story renovated warehouse. Usually warehouses don't have basements. You don't design a warehouse with basement because it's just not economic.
Okay.
So I checked the outline of the facility, matched it against the floor plan of the basement, and it was a match. So obviously there was a basement there. I didn't know how to get to it, and I didn't want my escort knowing that I knew that there was a basement there. But I was curious, and I was thumbing through some more, and I found a detailed floor plan for a 70 by 90 cryogenic chamber in that basement. And that's when I realized that something that was there in those drawings that should not be in those drawings if a regular contractor was supposed to take them and use them. But I wasn't going to say anything because if I did say something, there probably would be an investigation, and it would be difficult for me for a while because I had information that I was not supposed to have.
Fair enough. You don't want to draw any unneeded attention to yourself. We learned that very quick anywhere, and I know the policing's like quasi military. You want to, sometimes it's better off just to look, I'm not saying, in certain things, but for certain topics, sometimes it's better off just to pretend you didn't hear anything, pretend you don't know anything, because sometimes you draw the wrong kind of attention to yourself, or saying, oh, I know too much, or I know about this. You just draw negative attention to yourself, and then all of a sudden that pressure comes down on you. Right. You didn't do anything wrong. Right. So somebody else dropped the ball, and if you would have started running your mouth about it, you would have certainly paid the price for it.
Sure.
So whoever that person was that dropped the ball, they might have slid on that, but the fact that you saw something that they dropped the ball on, right, you would have went down for it. So I would say that was the move right there. You saw something maybe you weren't supposed to see. I don't know nothing. I didn't see anything. Leave me alone. I don't feel like having the next 20 years of my life ruined or something like that, because I'm getting harassed now by some, high-level government people for seeing some sort of top secret floor plans for something, Yeah. So, of course. So
I kept that secret for 5 years after I left the service. And an interesting thing is that even like right after it happened, I didn't feel pressure. I didn't feel stress. I just kind of like, it was filed back into my subconscious, and only when I saw something on Ancient Aliens did that jog my memory back, and that's when I decided that I needed to write a blog. So the blog was the precursor to my book.
Okay. Now, I just want to kind of put an exclamation point on the significance, because maybe some people who are watching this right now or listening to this right now are kind of like, well, so you found this cryogenic chamber. Like, what about a cryogenic chamber? I'm like, so maybe it's like some secret military stuff. Let's just kind of just quickly, just to kind of just give people an idea, like, what is the purpose of a cryogenic chamber? We're not storing microchips in a cryogenic chamber. We're not storing,
Not that big.
we're not storing any sort of like, what's that?
Not that big. It was 70 by 90. That's huge.
What are we storing? You know, what's the purpose of cryogenics? I mean, what would be like one of the main purposes right there? Like, it would probably be for some sort of biologics, no?
It keeps biological specimens in suspension. The temperature that you have in a cryogenic chamber is low enough to boil gas. Okay.
No, wow.
So,
Wow.
you know, I wrote down in the book, I think it's like minus 179 or something like that.
Okay. So what, like, would gas freeze at that point? Would like carbon dioxide freeze at negative one, or whatever
No,
gas is?
It boils.
Oh, it actually boils.
It boils at
Oh, wow.
temperature. Yeah.
Huh. It's that cold where, oh, wow.
Yeah.
So, and then again, this is a topic that's been talked about again and again. Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, and I've read a couple books. There was a book I read that was released from a bunch of whistleblowers inside. It was called Exempt from Disclosure. I think it's out of print now, but I read the book way back in like 2008, and this actually talked quite a bit about what commonly was referred to as the Blue Room at Wright-Patterson. Maybe not necessarily a room, but an area where this material, like some sort of underground catacombs where stuff was being stored, or underground warehouses. That was definitely known within the field that wreckage from Roswell was brought to, was it Hangar 18 at the time? That's the name of the hangar? Or was that at Wright-Patterson? But it was definitely known at some point in the chain of custody. I think one of the autopsies was done at Walter Reed Hospital in Washington, D.C., and then it was flown back out to Wright-Patterson. And the word was, from everybody that was talking, you know, the people that came out afterwards, was that it was being stored, the biologics. We're talking non-human bodies, humanoid bodies that were definitely not human, you know, or what we may commonly refer to, not knowing where they come from, as aliens, just for lack of a better word at the time. Their bodies were being stored in some type of suspension at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. And this would go right in line with what Paul stumbled upon, some sort of large underground cryogenic chamber that would be uncommonly big, and easily you'd be able to store, let's say, coffin-sized tubes with bodies, full-size bodies in them, you know, of small humanoid figures. This would be a proper facility. And the fact that you'd want to keep it so secret, where you'd want to actually knock the building down after and maybe have it buried under a parking lot. So there's a possibility that this facility still exists there. It just doesn't exist above ground. It's just an underground facility now under a parking lot somehow, accessed through some other.
Actually, I think what they did is they transferred the EBEs. EBEs are exotic biological entities. I think they transferred them to Fort Meade.
Fort Meade. Okay. So, all right. So that was part of the understanding. Yeah. And there was, I believe, somewhere in Kansas, in Corso's book, he claimed he was actually working as an MP earlier on in his career. And it was like July 7th, 1947.
Right.
And Corso was working as an MP, and one of his buddies took him out when he was in Kansas working as an MP at some warehouse and says, "Hey, I got to show you something. Come here. And he pulled him off to the side, and they popped open a box, and it said, like, this is the stuff that came out of Roswell. And he said he popped the lid of the box open, and he claims, at least per his account, is that he saw a humanoid figure, clearly non-human, suspended in like a bluish fluid inside of like a tank or something like that. That's what he personally witnessed firsthand. This is figure about 15 years before he was actually working at the Foreign Technology Division, when he was still a lower rank. So, you know, this definitely falls in line with, you know, at least what we know as far as the whistleblowers and the witnesses, the people that have talked to other people, and it falls in line with the lore like to not use that word so much, because you've had a lot of people who've had a lot of credibility to their names come forward and talk about that this stuff is real, so now moving forward from here, was after you saw this episode of Ancient Aliens, what point was your aha moment when you decided to start, after getting into your meditation, after maybe starting to have this sort of deeper understanding about what was going on here, that you decided to write a book like the Disclosure Paradox?
Okay. So I understood the link between the extraterrestrials and spirituality only after a couple of out-of-body experiences in meditation. The first was, and you got to understand that what I did when I started to meet these people that have had contact, I set up a group on Facebook so that they can talk to each other, because they were isolated. They were feeling ostracized by their family. So I set up this group called Spirits and Healing. And hold on for a second. All right. So, and with this group, people actually got to communicate with each other. And there were people that, one common thing was that they were psychic too. And one of the women that was psychic really made a connection with me, and to the point where she acted as a medium between an extraterrestrial race and myself. So,
oh wow,
yeah. So she would go into a trance, write things down, say things. She didn't know what she was saying, and then I would get it, and then I would repeat to her what she told me. These are very simple instructions and comments that I got, just saying that I was on the right path, that I was doing the right thing, that I was a counselor and informer, and that was my role to play. So that was one thing that kind of put me on that path about understanding the link between the extraterrestrials and our spirituality.
Great.
She told me that, actually they told me that they were going to do a test on me and in meditation. And sure enough, not long after they told me that, I had an out-of-body experience going through a wormhole, which was absolutely an amazing experience. If you saw the film Contact with Jodie Foster.
I did.
Yeah.
Great movie.
Do you remember that when she was in that?
Based on a Carl Sagan book.
Oh, yeah.
Go ahead.
When she was in that, when she was in that that vessel, that she went through that, she went through the wormhole, with the lights and the motion and everything. It was just like that.
For sure. Wow.
It was amazing. And
what?
Go ahead.
Did you did you just have that? Did you go somewhere at the end of that, or was it just lights and?
When I realized what was happening, I was back in my body. It was like, just I broke that plane of consciousness, and I was back in my body, and that entire experience was gone.
Was there a takeaway from that experience?
Yeah, the takeaway was that we have the ability to travel to other places with our mind.
Yeah. I mean, this is something that a lot of people know, like remote viewing, right. ESP, like the movie Men Who Stare at Goats, like this sort of thing that's been popularized with big media and Hollywood. But the concept behind that, I think, is a real concept. I think it's a real concept. I think some people that aren't trying to tap into this on a regular basis sometimes get little glimmers and glimpses of it. I recently heard something that kind of likened back to ESP. Joe Rogan was doing an interview with a retired FBI agent, and he said on one of the scariest nights of his job, he said where he thought he might be immediately killed. He was like a blink of an eye away from being found out in a room where he was locked in, guys with guns. It would have been potentially lights over for game over real quick if they found him out. He had a wire on him. He said his wife told him later on that evening. She was driving certainly miles away. I forget how many miles away, but she literally said during that exact moment, she got this overwhelming feeling and she pulled over to the side of the road and said a prayer for him. And she goes, I just knew something horrible was happening to you. I could feel it. It's just so people that aren't tapped into this sort of thing get glimpses of it here and there.
Sure. Yeah.
I remember when I was young, I think my grandfather had a stroke, and I had a vision of him falling off a chair and being like frozen on one side. And I woke up one morning. I said, "What? It was a weird dream." And then I heard later on, your grandfather had a stroke. I was like, "Wow, he lives in Florida. I live in New York."
Right.
I didn't even know where to file that in my brain. So I'm saying I think it's a real thing, and I think just most people aren't just how do you capture lightning in a bottle, and it's a lot of people just don't know, and it's just beyond the scope of what they can handle, But you're saying it's very much, once you learn how to handle this way of thinking and meditation, it's possible to kind of tap into this, whatever this is.
Right. And the second one that I document also in the book was. I guess people call the indigo cloud vision, and that was where I was just sitting down and doing my meditation, and all of a sudden a cloud of indigo appeared to me, and when it appeared to me, there was also a feeling of euphoria, and as I got closer to it and the cloud dissipated, all across the horizon were flashes of indigo. And as I got closer, the euphoria was even greater. And it was, like a feeling of happiness that you don't feel here on earth. It's just something beyond that.
Yeah.
So that's when I got the message of what it was. And what it was the flashes were all the spirits between lives downloading or uploading either downloading their previous life or uploading their next life. And that it was like a beehive of activity. So if you consider each one of those flashes are spirits, and all of those spirit, and each spirit has a certain amount of energy. And when you combine all of those spirits in one massive energy, and it has the same consciousness, that's what everyone calls God is. That's what that is. So when the Bible says that God's within us and around us, yes, it's true, because the spirit is with us individually, but then when it leaves the body through death and meets up with all the other spirits and combines into this one form, that's God. And then again, when I understood what that was going on, I was back in my body.
Yeah. Wow. That's quite a vision right there. That's very profound, to kind of see something like that. Everyone's always the big question, the big question. Where do we all go? What happens when it's game over? And I'm definitely a believer something happens. I've covered a little bit of that on my podcast before, but to have a vision like that, that's pretty powerful to kind of see hey, this is where we all go. This is, I'm sure, at some level after having that vision, I mean, do you feel the thought of dying is less scary to you? Has that somehow mitigated the fear of this Western way of thinking where it's lights out and then you just get put in a box and it's scary and everything's dark and I know there's there's definitely in a culture, and then Hollywood glorifies that in a way of horror and gore. There's this, almost a negative connotation surrounding death.
So, one of the things that Robert Dean has always said was that the extraterrestrials call Earth School, because it is the place where the spirit, which is an energy, links to us through our pineal gland, because the pineal gland acts as a spiritual receiver, and it is only through the human that the spirit could experience love, pain, suffering, creativity, beauty, all the things that make up the human experience. So Earth is a school, and it's important to know that in the big picture of the rest of the universe, it's very temporary in terms of time. We may think of it a lifetime as being long, but in reality, it's very short, and it's temporary. And when we've learned our lesson, or when we haven't learned our lesson, it's over, and we either return to learn the lesson that we haven't learned, or we advance to another level to gain a higher level of life based on the life that we led here. So no, I'm not afraid of it. It's just I call it graduation.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's a good way to look at it, so especially if we know the spirit goes on, that there's a reason to live a good life, because sometimes people, when they when they lose hope and they feel like, oh, it's lights out, it's all over. I remember I used to work down in the city as a police officer, and one night these kids, I forget what they were doing. They were stealing a ATM machine or something like that, and we had them in the hospital afterwards, and one of the kids is going on. He's like, well, why do I do good? He's like, there's no reason to do good. He's like, you're ending up in the same place I'm ending up. We're all ending up in the same place at the end of all this. Like, there's no, it's sad when people lose the path, and I think a lot of people walk through this life without maybe hope, and I think maybe like having, people feel like you need religion to give you that hope, because that's one of the big check marks that religion checks off. What happens after we die? If you live this life in accordance to this religion, you're going to go to this good place. If you don't, you're going to go to this bad place. So I think it's good to know that there's another path out there of spirituality and understanding, even if you're not someone and I'm not bashing anybody who's into religion. I'm just saying there's other paths to get there, and maybe one of them might have nothing to do with religion, just being spiritual, understanding that this is a school, there's still a reason to be good, and, we graduate from here like anywhere else we graduate. You do good in high school, you go to a good college, you do good in college, you go to a good job, you do a good job, you get a good retirement, and you see your grandkids and kids grow up. There's always a graduation, and then at the end of life, if you've led a good life and a proper life and you've served others correctly, maybe you've learned the lessons that we needed to learn in this life. Maybe at that point, it's just a graduation to something beyond this life, another, like you said, another realm. So getting back into the book now. So this character, the main character, Louis Silvani, he's basically like a guy, like you said, he pretty much kind of mirrors in a lot of aspects your life now. Did this, I know for Louis at least, or Louis, his obsession with UFO research started to negatively impact his family, and it kind of led to some maybe issues in his personal life.
Right.
Like, did you feel yourself going down? Because I could see how you can go down that rabbit hole. Because I think once you start getting the aha moment, like for example, I've known about the concept of Dulce for, I'd say, since about probably 2009, 2010. And the more I've looked into it, the more books I've read, and the more, I've gone back over information and going over interviews and going over, guys like Phil Schneider. And, I read one very powerful book that I covered on one of my previous podcasts, it was a book called UFO Highway by Anthony Sanchez. Actually has a whistleblower in that book, and he releases in the book the guy's military discharge papers, and it shows on this guy's must have been like a clerical error that they let this slip through, but he actually had a function he served as a psychologist out there at Dulce.
Wow.
So as much as people want to try to bash him, this guy actually had a DD-214 with a job function on that for meritorious service for serving at this base. So
wow.
I think a lot of if you start pulling back all the smoke around this situation that the book kind of circles around, this Dulce base, the cattle mutilations, the local Jicarilla Apache, was it the Jicarilla?
Yeah.
Is it Jicarilla Apache?
Yep.
Who live on an Indian reservation? It's kind of the perfect crime. A lot of people know there's a lot of strange activity going out there. You got a lot of people of high credibility, from police officers to local people, that hear just a lot of strange stuff going out there, from hearing like underground highway at nighttime to seeing up close craft, teardrop shaped glowing craft with aliens inside of them, and they can see purple lights on the inside. Like, you've had a lot of people come forward with a lot of strangeness going on out there. And the more you see, like, you know, when you first hear about, you read about a story like Phil Schneider, which is a guy that claims he got into some shootout underground, you're just like, the skeptical side of all of us is just like, okay, yeah, wow, the crazies all come out to this one, and there's like a whole group of lemmings that are just gonna chirp right along with that's the brain we all have been given by this society, is like right automatically jump to skeptical. But like, the more you read about these things, like you realize that there's a lot that has come out about them, and this could negatively impact your personal life for sure. You start talking about this stuff to your wife, to your coworkers at your job, they're more than likely going to start rolling their eyes. Even if you're right, they're going to start rolling their eyes at you like, wow, like this guy is certified crazy. Like, we didn't know it, and now we know. So you can see how this could negatively impact somebody's life. Is this something that happened at any level in your life or with your family or anything like that? Because I know the main character experienced some of this.
No, actually, my family has been pretty understanding. I've been kind of relaying to them, to my wife, for example, all the things that have been happening to me. And I guess one thing that has helped was introducing her to one of the characters that I write about in the novel, who I call the Divine Warrior. And we had him for dinner, and he explained everything that happened to him, just like I write in the book. So, you know, she very much believes about the spiritual part. The ET stuff, she will take it with a grain of salt, but she's certainly not accusing me of being over the edge.
Okay, that's good. That's great to hear that you've been surrounded by people that understand your path and respect, you know, at least some of the information that you've come across. Because like I said, it just, you know, we live in a society with a lot of people who have and are still trying to sell what, you know, like snake oil. So it's real easy to get taken. And I've seen this in the UFO world. I've been probably in this UFO research game since approximately 2007, 2008. And I've seen over the course of that time period, we're coming up on almost 20 years of me like looking into this pretty heavily, that even some really big names in the UFO field have gotten taken before with some stories, and they say, oh, it looks real, you know, like I'm going to put my name on this, you know, they start talking about it. And then like a lot of these things are thrown out there just so when it reaches the public, they can say, well, this was an absolute bunk. And look at this guy was behind it. And like, once they shame you, it's almost like being tarred and feathered. Mm-hmm. And like, they're looking, there's like a counterintelligence game in this UFO world that like loves to publicly, like, for lack of a better word, like tar and feather UFO researchers. Because once they get you one good time, you'll walk around the rest of your life trying to shake that tar and feather off you, because there's always somebody out there who's going to bring it up. And like, it's a slippery slope to walk on. You know, you want to get the truth forward, but the second someone says, we caught you, you put yourself behind that, you sponsored that, and you were wrong, you're a phony, you're a fraud, go crawl back into the hole wherever you came from. And your main character, like, have you ever experienced that actually? And because I know Louis experienced that he went to a UFO conference and he thought it was going to be, he was a speaker at a UFO conference, right? You want to get, like, getting a little bit of that. He thought it was going to be well received. And I even though I wasn't a speaker, I started a clothing line years back. I went up to a disclosure conference in Canada. I thought it was going to be so well received. Like, everyone's going to be like, oh, wow, you're trying to get the truth out there with a clothing line. How cool. I literally got cornered. And people are like, oh, I can't believe you would put that image on a shirt. You're doing a disservice to this community. You know, that's the military industrial complex, that big gray alien face. I can't believe you would do. And I'm like, I'm sorry, are you serious? They're like, yeah, you have that gray alien head on your T-shirt. You're really doing this whole community a disservice because that was put forward. I was like, whoa. I was like, well, how did I step on this landmine? I was like, I'm going to go outside and just grab some fresh air. But so you want to talk about, like, and this could happen. It's a very divided community. Louis has good intentions. He goes out there, he finds out about like this Dulce base. He finds out about, maybe some facts about the UFO world, and he thinks that it's going to be received with open arms.
Right.
And it actually turns out to be just the opposite.
Exactly. Yeah. That was all fiction. That was all made up to develop the plot. But I know that it happens. I've seen people being ostracized for trying to tell the truth, and the biggest opposition that I get, believe it or not, are from atheists. Yeah, they.
Why do you think that?
Well, because
they believe in like the fact that they just refuse to believe in anything.
Right.
Being an atheist, like, hey, I don't believe in anything. Like, so maybe that same sort of mentality transfers over to like anything to do with something that's not in front of them. They can't grab it, they can't squeeze it or touch it, or
right. I tell them I can't offer proof. I can't offer proof of what I had in meditation, but you're gonna have to take my word for it, and they refuse to do that. So,
yeah. So do you want to just get into it? I know like there's quite a couple characters, like you said. I don't know how far, like as far as Louis goes, like it definitely crosses over your life. But then as he gets into this journey, which is what the meat of the book is about, he meets some other characters. He has a retired military friend who's a Colonel McGeorge. He meets a psychic named Paris Nance who kind of guides him. Is that kind of like in your life, like you met this medium?
right.
And then he meets a woman at one of his conferences named Mary Ellen Velarde, who's Jicarilla Apache. She basically points him in the direction of like, hey, like you're talking about this Dulce base. Like how far along, like, would you like to discuss as far as like what, like as far as the plot develops? Kind of just give people an idea, maybe like the idea of what the book might get into, or like the basis of the book, like what.
Like I say that all
what are we
all
looking at? So
all characters are based on real people that I know, or combinations of people that I know. All the events that happen along the way did not happen, but all the places are real. Including, for instance, the Japanese internment camp, Dulce, New Mexico. The Mount Shasta and all the talk about Mount Shasta, that's all based on stuff that I know. Now, what actually happened in the book did not actually happen. I just make those events occur to guide the plot along. Like for instance, Edward Air Force Base, right, where they have the they show up after being in at Area 51. They take the high speed rail underground from Area 51 to Edwards Air Force Base, right? Yeah. So
the maglev trains, those are well known about when you start breaching the Dulce topic.
Yeah, that's
Los Alamos.
That's all real.
Supposedly a maglev system that connects all these facilities.
Right.
High speed underground magnetic train.
DUMBS,
which is real technology.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's all real. It's just that the events that happen are not real. But you could take comfort in knowing that even like the autistic woman, Kaya, who is an artist, and she paints portraits of extraterrestrials from her memory. It's based on a real person. Yeah.
Wow.
So the plot is that the Jicarilla Apache woman has a plan, and she doesn't reveal her plan to Louis, but she convinces him to go with her back to Dulce, where she lives, because he was challenged in going to places that he was talking about Dulce and Shasta by the hecklers at the conference.
He was shamed.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, hey, you're talking about all this stuff. Have you ever been there?
Right.
Oh, then sit down.
Right.
God,
So,
yeah, understood. So that's a good way to set that up, you know.
Yeah.
And that's a realistic. I mean, I could see something like that happening. I could see someone, especially if you start going around UFO conferences and talking about these places, like
you get
you're
challenged.
definitely going to get checked at some point.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Like I said, I experienced just a little sample of that, and I'm like, damn. I didn't even come here to I just came here to maybe sell a couple T-shirts. I'm like, I'm not even a speaker here. I'm like, I'm just hanging out in the hallway. I got to meet Richard Dolan. Has a picture of me on my Instagram with hanging out with Richard Dolan, giving a thumbs up. Yeah.
All right.
So like at there, Steve Bassett was there. So
okay.
All right. So as far as that goes, so she doesn't reveal this plan, but he goes out to Dulce, and he, with the intention of like, hey, let me just get out there. Maybe this woman, Mary Ellen Velarde, knows a little bit more. Now, did you meet someone actually that, like you said, everybody has a stand-in? Did you actually meet someone who was Jicarilla Apache that actually knew a little bit more something about Dulce, or like claim that they did?
No, the spirituality behind Mary Ellen, the things that she can do, that's based on a real person. But I made her a Jicarilla Apache woman to make the plot work.
And great idea. I think you did a lot in this book. It seems like you really did your homework. You did. Yeah, I even know in your credits at the end of the book, you thank someone who did like systems, because you're an engineer, but you even followed that up with someone who might know about like military facility engineering and building engineering, like how like a place like this might be laid out. Because there's a lot of that. There's a lot of stuff that's come out about Dulce and about how exactly they retrofitted it, and there's just so many different stories about what exactly is going on down there. But for those that don't know, supposedly there's some sort of joint human alien, and I think the people that look into this more almost kind of look at it more like maybe joint human intraterrestrials, some sort of group that's been down there. And at least according and just recently, like I said, after I found out that Sanchez book, this psychologist apparently that used to work there, really no way for me to follow up and interview this guy. This guy said he's going into hiding after he does this interview. And it's a situation where if you follow the breadcrumb trail, people have and probably are still either being threatened with their lives or murdered to keep this quiet. So if you really start peeling back the layers, it's very, very serious. It's at the highest levels of the Department of Defense. And I think it's considered a breach of national security. So the people that actually are working there aren't going to be talking about it, because they'll be disappearing very quickly if they start running their mouth, especially if they've signed anything that's basically saying like, hey, you start running your mouth after signing this piece of paper, you're basically going to be terminated, because you're going to violate some sort of oath of national security. You're putting thousands of people who live in this country, their lives at risk by talking about this. So you've become a threat. So you're not going to really get people coming out about this, but at the end of the day, the stuff that's being talked about, like the maglev trains, the what this facility might be, this sort of joint human interterrestrial, they discovered something under this mountain at some point, is what the talk is, and it's been there at least as long as it was discovered, and more than likely based upon another whistleblower. I mean, he said they were finding technology covered in dust that looked like it was there for at least a couple hundred years, and it was better than the technology that we had probably had in the 80s and 90s by far.
Sure.
So maybe somebody has been down there for a long, long time,
Sure.
and somehow some agreement was struck between this group of interterrestrials and the military industrial complex. Like, hey, one hand washes the other. You give us a little something, we give you a little something. Maybe we give you your space to do whatever work you've been doing. I don't know what it is, but if it's taking cows and abducting people, like, who knows what the deal was, but some deal was struck at some point. So that's like what supposedly is going on out there. And I remember when I read that book, Exempt from Disclosure, in the book they talked about Los Alamos, and they're like, look at Los Alamos Laboratories, and they're like, look at the size of the parking lot. Then he goes, look at the size of the building. Look at the size of the parking lot. Look at the size of the building. The building doesn't really look big enough to really house as many people as the parking lot holds. So I said, what exactly is going on there? And we're telling you what exactly is going on there is there's an underground maglev train that takes a lot of these people
Sure.
that go into that building and shoots them out 300, 400, 500, 600 miles. And a maglev train could do that within an hour and a half to these other types of facilities, Groom Lake and, Edwards Air Force Base. So, it's good that you did your homework and you really developed this in a way that's believable in the sense it kind of crosses back over with, like, it gets into a little bit about chemtrails. It gets into a little bit about the underground train system. It gets a little bit about maybe like they call them ME-Labs or military. There was a book written on this a while back.
Military labs? Yeah.
Was that?
Yeah, military labs.
Yeah, yeah, and they would do like abductions, like military abductions, and like, make people kind of like gaslight people, maybe doing some experiments with people and saying, like, there's people that have come out about books and saying that they feel like they've been abducted, but they're not sure if it's from people in the military that are doing it. So like this one woman that, might be working as a radar operator, seeing some of these testing of these exotic craft, kind of comes across one of the characters in those books, and some of the things, like some of the serious topics that they talk about, maybe like some of like these military abductions with the Department of Defense. Where's the line of morality of what people can do and cannot do? Are they allowed to sexually assault people, to put terror into them, to make them forget things? Like, once you start talking about murdering people, like the line of the morality of how to keep secrets and doing whatever some of these defense contractor facilities, like a place of Dulce, more than likely would be probably overseen by the Department of Defense, but not necessarily operated directly by the military, but some branch of the private sector with the military. It gets very complicated, and I think it steps outside of what we commonly know as government in this country, and it's kind of weird to kind of think, but it definitely seems like you did your homework on all angles of this. You really developed these characters in a way that's very believable, even though if it didn't happen with you. So like I said, there's some serious topics that come up, like you said, with how they might keep people compliant, maybe some of the threats and some of the things that really more than likely do happen, and it's like, where's the voice for these people, and then it comes down to, I think, the title of the book, which is the disclosure paradox. You want to let the people know, like, what exactly is the disclosure paradox, and how that's very relevant, the title of the book, to why, like the journey of this book, so why that's so relevant.
That comes out at the end of the book, and everyone knows what disclosure is. It's the effort of the public to apply pressure on governments to divulge information related to extraterrestrials and their technology, right? That's what disclosure is. And again, getting back to Robert Dean and learning some things that I learned in meditation and from the woman who acted as a medium for me. Humans are the most dangerous species in the universe to everyone. Now, the one thing that happened that caused extraterrestrials to have a WTF moment was when we exploded the atomic bombs in Japan, because they realized that we were children playing with matches. They realized that our scientists did not know that the explosion and that massive amount of energy released not only affected what we see, but also affected other dimensions. And so it was like a fire alarm throughout the universe. And that's why after that, there was such a spike in UFO activities all over the world. Mostly, though, at places where we were experimenting with nuclear power. Okay?
Yeah.
So my hypothesis about this disclosure, and again, based on what I learned from Robert Dean, is that if we were to have disclosure, then we would have contact. If we would have contact, eventually we would have an exchange of technology. Okay? If we would have that exchange of technology, our systems, which are unethical, based on greed, and just largely just based on wanting things, they would take that technology, weaponize it, and use it against those that gave it to us. How? They would do it like in the name of what we did with the Native Americans with Manifest Destiny, the Monroe Doctrine, the spreading of Christianity, for example, could be another excuse, or just going after weapons of mass destruction, which is another excuse, or just going after their the scarce resources that we may need and not have, like Greenland, for example. It's the same principle. And they know about that, and they have advised our governments that if there would be disclosure and that we would gain their technology, they would do a preemptive strike to protect themselves. So our governments know that, and that's why they are stalling on this disclosure, because it's in our best interests that it doesn't happen. We're not ready spiritually. We are, according to the extraterrestrial community, we are barbaric, we're violent, we have an irrational obsession with possessions, and we are racist to the point of genocidal. And you combine that with our extreme intelligence, because we are more intelligent than they are. They're just more developed than we are. They've been around much longer. They've been allowed to develop. But we have a higher level of intelligence, which is why our technology spikes so quickly. So because of that, we are on what's called under a technological and social quarantine. Okay. And until we change fundamentally, until we release ourselves of the things that make us corrupt and barbaric, we're going to remain that way. So we have to have a fundamental change spiritually if we are to join with the rest of the universal community.
Yeah. We need to develop, you're saying we need to develop spiritually to the point, like you could see even what's going on in the world now. I mean, there's just we could go on a whole 2-3 hour podcast and barely scratch the surface of all the things going around on this planet right now of humans damaging or hurting other beings or other people and holding other people down, and poverty and the wars that are going on around. It's just we can't seem to shake this tribal mentality, and once these sorts of really powerful figures get into power and they assume, to become like dictator-like figures, it's scary because you're serving the carnal desires of one individual. And it's like the old saying, and I think this old saying rings extremely and terribly true. What is it? Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And it's like, humanity has got to wake up. And I think it's good, that you're even putting this forward in your book. You're having these, even though it's in a sense, it's a fictional book. You're putting forward real topics and real events, and you're weaving them together in a very a believable story that was really enjoyable. It's definitely great that you kind of came up with this and put some of the real hard topics going on right now that just aren't being talked about. And it's like they're almost like so serious that like the people that do the 5 o'clock news, the 7 o'clock news, even though they're starting to breach the topic of like, oh, we have these UAPs, like the government's like knows they exist, they're saying they exist, but they're just not quite sure what they are like. And the people that have been researching this for like decades, and like, even where I'm at, even though there's people out there that trump my research by decades, I've seen enough leaked documents and pictures. I mean, I don't know, I have it sitting around here somewhere in my room. I had a picture that leaked out about, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago. Was actually one of the engines of like one of these ships. One of the whistleblowers actually took some high resolution scans of it. I remember I got some of the lettering tattooed. I was really into this one case, but I was like, you realize that no matter how hard or how high of a mountaintop you scream from and say like, hey, I'm not just some wackadoodle, coming up with some wild idea of like what's going on. Like you have like legitimate, hardworking people, like people that have served this country, people that are like super straight-laced people that have come forward and talked about this stuff. Like this is real. This is going on, and I'm like, we're just like nationally, we're just like barely scratching the surface of like a David Grush coming forward and being like, well, we have biologics, and it's like, well, can you roll that tape back? So you're basically saying this guy's coming forward and saying, and like, even though David Grush came forward, there was supposed to be this huge disclosure moment because of that. Like, oh, well, this guy who worked as a very high level operative and what was it, like in the Air Force or whatever, like he was like, I forget like exactly his role or whatever, like investigation did, but he was like way up there. He's coming forward. He's saying that there's biologics. He's saying that there's hardware. This is the real deal. Like a guy that was on the inside of these private circles who had the clearance is saying, I swear that this is the truth. Then these two senators came forward. I forget one was Chuck Schumer. It just escapes me the other guy. There was a Democrat and a Republican. They came together like in the center of the aisle. And they said, we're going to form this 23 or 24 Disclosure Act. And part of the clause of that act actually was to, if any private entity or organization like DOD contractor has biologics or hardware, we're now signing a clause that's saying you have to come forward publicly to this committee and bring this forward. They fought that tooth and nail. And when the actual act was signed in 2024, that was nixed, like the best part of the act. When they said, oh, there's this guy from the government, he came forward, he's talking about it. Now there's going to be this act that's going to force the hand of these government contractors to bring forward their biologics and their hardware, at least say that they have them, so this could be investigated further. That part of the act was actually taken out. Mm-hmm. And it turns out that one of the senators, was in the jurisdiction of where one of these military contractors, I forget if it was Lockheed Martin or whatever, and they fought it tooth and nail. They said, you have to take that out of this act. Basically, in a roundabout way, it was verifying that, yes, whatever David Grush came forward and said is the truth. They tried to ruin this guy, even though as much as he served this country, they tried to say something about PTSD, and because he went through a rough patch, they tried to publicly, I guess, socially, execute him, basically saying, this is the only way. If you can't attack the facts about what this person's saying, you might as well just go back to the way third graders act and attack the person, because we can't actually go after. So that's where we're at publicly. So it's almost like the only way we really can get the truth out there is by doing what you did and writing a book, where you basically do kind of like what I think Tom DeLonge did a series of these books too, called Secret Shadows, Chasing Machines. I had the first copy of it. I didn't read the other two books yet, but I know he did something, I wouldn't say it's similar, but something in an idea where he took facts that were being handed to him from maybe some high-level operatives and high-level figures in the government and putting them into fictional books to maybe make it more digestible to the public. And this is a beautiful way to do it, because you could go out there and talk about everything that you know about, and you're easily going to have someone come forward and say, oh, well, that cryogenic chamber, do you have any proof that you actually saw that? Do you have any proof? Okay, what are you expecting? I was going to steal a top secret document, get myself locked away in a military prison for the rest of my life, or have my pension taken from me, my job destroyed, my life ruined. What would you have done? It's the burden of proof on people who have experienced, extraordinary things like yourself. It's just your story and your word, and you have to take people for their word. And it's easy to have a skeptic come along and, someone like me even covering this topic, someone like you for coming forward and writing a book and just saying, oh yeah, bunk. Well, how are you going to prove that I'm saying that you're bunk and I'm not, and I'm not speaking the truth and you're speaking the truth? You know what I'm saying? So it's easy to do that in the world of skeptics, and with this whole counterintelligence way that the DOD is handled and the government is handled, probably through programs that MJ-12 set up decades ago, how they would give misinformation out there to kind of water down the truths that come out about these topics. So as far as
I was going to tell you, you asked about disclosure paradox. The paradox is, how are we as a human race supposed to improve ourselves spiritually if we're not allowed to know what's wrong with us? And that is being forced upon us by religion, organized religion. Because what organized religion tells us is that we are evil because of our ancestry. And so they call that original sin, right? Well, that's not the case. Our original sin is our DNA. That's why you can't get rid of it. And it's just like being an alcoholic. You have to acknowledge what's wrong with you before you cure yourself. So
Yeah,
until we
for sure.
acknowledge that we are flawed in the way that I mentioned, in the way that the extraterrestrials recognize us, we can't fix ourselves.
Yeah, very, very true. That's very deep and that's very profound. And what would you say if you had to like recommend is one step to making that better for all of us? If like we're talking to the world right now,
One rule,
people of the world.
one rule, and it's in the Bible. Jesus said it. It is, we are here to make life better for others instead of making life better for ourselves at the expense of others. You follow that rule.
I like that.
You follow that rule and you're going to clean up a lot.
I like that. I like that. I think it's good. I think I always say that. I start my podcast off and I have like an intro and an outro. I thank everyone who's led a life of service. I do honestly believe ever since I did a couple benefits, I was a musician. I did a couple benefit shows, concerts where I did fundraisers for Iraq war veterans. A buddy of mine who I met wrote a book, and his name is Barry Fixler. Actually, he wrote a book about his time in the Marine Corps. He fought in one of the longest battles called Kai Song, and he wrote a book about it. All the proceeds of his book was going towards helping Iraq war veterans and people that actually, came back, and the government and the veteran services just aren't doing enough for them. So I got involved in a couple concerts for him, and I did a couple, and then I realized like, wow, this really feels good. It really feels good to do something that makes people's lives. And I didn't discover that about myself until like a little bit like later in my life, probably when I was already in my late 20s, early 30s, that, I had a grandfather who fought in 13 battles of World War II. I had a mother who was a nurse. I didn't really find my calling as I became an EMT and then a police officer, and just, now I'm currently looking at a master's program in psychology, clinical mental health, just helping people, like realizing that like it's a better life. It's a better life to want to help people, to want to serve, there's a lot of people that need help. There's a lot of things that are off in this world. And like, and like you said it. And the older I get, I see it. And I'm always saying that every day I wake up, I always try to thank God or whatever the higher power is for another day, regardless of my flaws, regardless of all the things I've come short in this life, which is too many to list, as sure as many of us, but realizing that like, it's so short. We don't have that much time. We have such a small amount of time. And it's like, if you really look at the amount of time we actually have, and I'm currently reading a book right now on Audible about the dynasty of Egypt and the whole history of Egypt, and like the 22, I think I'm on dynasty 23 already of this book, like the generations of people that have come before us and how quick their lives come and go, and how many of them lived to serve themselves and like what they thought was the best life, which was, being in opulence for themselves, which was give them a better afterlife. But like now we're seeing that like, it's not only is it so short, but like how with this short amount of time could we do something that's impactful, that's actually going to make the world a better place? Right. And that's a tall drink right there. It's easy to say like, all right, we'll just make the world a better place. Go outside and give someone a hug and a handshake. But it's like in reality, once bills start piling on, once the stresses of life start piling on, once the need to have to keep your lights in your house on and put your kids through school, and like, that's when people start stepping on each other, and like all the negative stuff about humanity comes out. But it's good to be able to maybe take a little bit of a step back from that, just ask yourself, what can I do practically, like with the resources I have? Like, for example, I'm trying to get the word out there about a lot of the stuff going on. This podcast, I spend more money than I make on this podcast. I pay my bills right now through being a police officer, not through being a podcaster. This is just something I do because I genuinely feel like, glory to God, hopefully it doesn't happen, but God forbid something happens to me on the job. I'm in the newspapers 6 months from now, something happens where I'm not alive anymore, a year from now, because something terrible happened to me. Maybe I left some clue to some other people, or like trying to do something, it's so hard for us to kind of put actions behind that, but that's very powerful. As to everybody, I think, could do something if you really took a step back and maybe try to meditate for a couple weeks and try to slow your mind down and try to find how, with the resources I currently have, could I make some impactful difference on this world, some way, shape, or form, even if it's 0.0000 whatever percent, just something more than when you came here. It's just a little better, however you impacted the people around you.
Yeah.
And I want to ask you before we get too far up the topic and wrap things up, would you say the disclosure paradox in a way, and this is like thrown back at you, like almost like, for lack of a better word, I'd say I'm playing devil's advocate right now. Dulce, what may be going on out there if it's a real facility? Like I said, I'm a proponent of it. I get how anybody could just laugh at it and say it's not there. Like you said in your book, 50% of the population is like, oh yeah, there might be something going out there. 50% of people, oh, it's just some folklore and some just nonsense. If there is something going out there, and just let's say the premise of it is more than likely, if there is something going out there, the premise of it would be like one hand washes the other. Has there not already been at some level some sort of exchange of technology? You know, maybe they're withholding to us and only giving us little snippets of maybe something that makes, and it's probably more than likely, if it's the Department of Defense, being used to better weapon systems, things that potentially could be used to cause more harm and destruction. Like, you know, has that Pandora's box already kind of been opened? And, you know, where's the morality as far as, you know, like hoping and praying that people that are doing things beyond the scope of any faction of government that we know is writing the rules here, playing around with technology that might be thousands of years beyond the scope of what we're really spiritually able to handle. Like, you know, is there a potential that this Pandora's box has already been opened? And like, you know, do you have any comment on that? At least I know it's kind of like an open-ended, tricky question, but like, is the disclosure paradox, has that already kind of been violated in the sense that like, yeah, it's being withheld from the public at threat of like death maybe or whatever, but has not some of that already happened where like there's this exchange of technology going for like, hey, you can go kill cows and abduct cows for whatever your experiments are, as long as you can give us some idea of the propulsion system of some of the ships that you're using, you know? Like maybe something like that's going on.
Doing research and talking to people and looking at a lot of you know, a lot of documents about the matter. I hypothesize that there was, once we exploded the atomic bombs, and once there was interest from the universal community, there was interest on both sides, the good and bad. So the good wanted to meet with Eisenhower at Hulbert Field in Florida, but the prerequisite was that we were supposed to release ourselves of the atomic energy program. And Eisenhower thought that was a Russian plot, so he didn't meet with them. Later on, they got contact from another group, and they wanted to meet with him at Holloman Air Force Base, New Mexico.
1954, yes. Yeah.
So he showed up. They didn't show up. They sent their androids, which were the Greys. The Greys are actually an advanced android. And the ones that were their masters were the reptilians, the ones that are at Dulce now. So, so to make themselves look less malevolent, they sent the Greys. When the Greys were giving the rules, or you know, the deal was that the U.S. would get information related to technology. In exchange, they would allow them to abduct people, but not harm them, and abduct livestock. Okay. Eisenhower didn't like that idea, and he left in the middle of the meeting. But who was left were executives from Northrop, from Boeing, from Rockwell, the Archbishop of Los Angeles. They all remained, and they made the agreement with the extraterrestrials, not our government. So so that's what became the military-industrial complex's ace in the hole. They got the technology that they wanted, but the extraterrestrials were smart enough not to give them all of the technology. They would just give them snippets and stuff. And you're right, they would only give them technology that would make things worse for humanity, because that's what their goal was.
Oh boy,
that's what their goal was. So
So is it kind of like
So,
making a deal with the devil?
yeah. So Eisenhower, when he left, he made a speech, and he did mention cryptically the military-industrial complex, and that's what he was
Yes.
describing. And in my opinion, I
Yes.
think JFK found out about it, and he actually wanted to do something about it, and that's what made him
Yeah.
get assassinated.
Yeah. Yeah. There's definitely a lot of talk about that with the JFK assassination.
So you ask, why are they
Yeah.
doing it,
So
right? You ask why they're doing this. And my hypothesis is that based on things that I hear, again, what I learned from Robert Dean was that these malevolent extraterrestrials, they don't know what love is, so they can't simulate it. They can't make it up. And you see,
yeah.
love is used as a telepathic communication in the
Yeah.
universe, because when someone sees a ship and they want to find out if it's malevolent or benign, they just send
Yeah.
out a
Yeah.
telepathic message of love, of greeting. And
Okay.
if they get back that same greeting, they know that that's a good ship. If they don't get anything back,
Okay.
they know that it's questionable or suspect, and they raise
You don't
their
want to get
shield,
abducted.
right?
Yeah. Stay away from that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what they're trying to find out, in my hypothesis, they're trying to find out if love is in our DNA, and that's what they've been experimenting with, so that they could take that, they could simulate
That's
it,
deep.
and then they could make a fake telepathic message and trick the good guys.
Oh, geez, yeah. So we believe, yeah, because we've had a lot of speculation about this different groups, and we all know there's more than likely different groups of extraterrestrials. Like you seem like you had the Arcturians, who almost kind of likened to maybe like what that who was it? Corey Good came forward and talked about the blue avians.
Yeah, the blue avians. Yeah,
they said blue. Yeah, the blue feather. They had this giant structure outside the sun when these solar flares were coming up. They were protecting us from being basically like blowing us back into the Stone Age. You know, like they were actually here. We didn't know about it. So there's like groups that come to protect us because they have the technology to do so. Then there's groups like the other one was it? That's the Arcturians. There was. What was the ones that sucked the energy? The Archons, or emotional vampires.
Right.
We have vying groups that are like overseeing us, that are like almost kind of like the Earth is kind of like a chessboard for their battles to play out.
Right.
You know, like, hey, we want to see good, we want to see bad, and we kind of see this, you know, over the course of time with our battles on our planet too. Like, you know, like for example, like the Nazis come along, and then it's a matter of good and evil, like this overarching theme of good and evil on this planet.
Right.
So quite profound, and quite an excellent message that you have, what we need to do, how we need to live a better life of service to try to make this life a little better for each one of us. Paul, I certainly appreciate you coming on Not Media. Is there anything else that you would like to talk about? Because I know we covered, I didn't want to go too much into the plot of the book to like spoil it, but we covered quite a bit about the book. I didn't want to get, you know, like I took some good notes on the book, but I left a lot of them out just because I kind of discussed with you before we started this. I didn't want to have too many spoilers because, you know, I think if you have a spoiler, then like reading the book is not as fun. So it was a really good book. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I think, you know, having these real topics that you kind of weaved into this awesome action-packed story was really cool. I thought it was a really great idea.
You know,
is there anything that you want to leave the listeners off with?
Well, a couple of things. It won an award for Best Science Fiction Alien Story by Book Fest, which is kind of cool. That's a semi-annual award.
Very cool.
The other thing is that you know, in the preface, if people go into the website, they could see descriptions of characters, and they could read the preface. They could read reviews from various people that were done prior to publication. But in the preface, I kind of guide the reader through fate and destiny and the roles we play. Everyone has a role to play. But the important thing to understand is that other people have a greater impact on your life than you have on yourself. So, no matter how much you try to point yourself in a certain direction. There's always something that's going to cause you to actually go into the role that you're meant to be. You know, sure, you can try and skew in that direction, and maybe instead of being a straight line, it's a curvilinear line, but the end is always what your role is about. And people have to, through meditation, for example, people could learn to understand their role.
Yeah. That's good. That's a very powerful message, that we all, some level, have a purpose, and it might not necessarily be about us finding our purpose. Maybe taking a step back and letting the universe show us what maybe our role in this world is.
Yeah.
Before we say, hey, I have to be doing this, and if I'm not doing this, and I'm not going to be happy with my life, and I'm going to go sit in the corner and sulk, and say, hey, maybe if I take a step back, maybe there's already a role for me here, and maybe I just need to kind of lean maybe back a little bit and give that a little chance to develop, so I could say, hey, where do I fit in better, as opposed to what do I want to do, making it more about me. Yeah, that's really powerful. I already kind of mentioned the website where they can get the book at. Is there anything else that you want to leave the listeners with as far as contacting places best to find the book to buy? Or
yeah, they could contact me.
Is there an Audible version?
No, not yet.
Okay.
I want it, but it'll take a while. But
yeah, I understand. Yeah, you're gonna have somebody narrate it if you don't want to narrate it. I could see that being a whole process in itself, but I'm sure people would love to check the book out wherever it's best found right now.
Yeah, so. But the website's really good, and they could go in and they could subscribe. If they subscribe, then I'll get a message on my email that they subscribe, and that's how they could contact me if they want. I'm also on Blue Sky, PGV author at Blue Sky. I have a Facebook group which is called Discussions About the Disclosure Paradox, and that's a Facebook group that's open for everyone.
Very cool.
I have a Facebook page for authors called Paul Vaquette Writer, and so those are things that that they could contact me with. Also, all of the stuff that we're talking about, it's going to be carried over, like especially what is happening in Dulce. It's carried over in the sequel, which will be released in October.
Oh, that's great. Looking forward to checking that out. Maybe at some point I can have you on again. After the book comes out, we'll see. I'll get a chance to read that book. I'm looking forward to checking it out.
And
if you have a sequel to that, you're already.
That one's called Salvation, and it has Robert Ladd and Katrina and Mary Ellen and other things, and it involves a conspiracy to destroy the Shroud of Turin. So it links the blood of Jesus to Dulce.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's something else. Yeah. I know that's been a big one. The Shroud of Turin and the blood that's on there. Is it Jesus's blood or whatever? That's been a big topic, nothing that I've researched too much, but I just, I've heard some things in different research circles.
And that was
awesome.
I have a foreword from that book written by a prominent researcher on the Shroud. He read the manuscript. He loved it so much. He actually wrote the foreword for it. He's been writing research papers for 40 years on the Shroud. And
very cool.
I was invited to go to the symposium and conference on the Shroud of Turin 2025 by him in August. So I'll be there for that.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Looking forward to reading that book. And again, if you just check out all of the different outlets that Paul had just mentioned, I know we had talked about www.thedisclosureparadox.com. That's Paul's website. He's got his Facebook page, and you said it was a media page too through Blue. Was it Blue
Sky
Media? Or
Blue Sky.
Blue Sky.
Yeah.
Okay. So I certainly appreciate you coming on. Thank you for writing that book. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I had a great time talking with you. I wish you the best of luck on your book upcoming this October.
Would you do me a favor?
Like I said, if you ever want to come back. Yeah, no problem.
Would you write a review for me?
What's that?
Or rate it?
Yeah, I could write a review for this book.
Yeah.
I definitely will. No doubt about that. I will be sure to do that.
Thanks.
So, yep. So I will go ahead and write you that review. Everybody check Paul's book out. Definitely worth the read, worth your time. Look forward to reading Paul's book coming out this October. Thank you again, Paul. I appreciate you coming on Not Media. You have a nice evening. Everybody else, stay well, all right?
Thanks, JP.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you all for listening to this episode, and thank you everyone who has chosen a life of service. This is not just military, fire, police, and EMS, but also anyone who has taken their talents and passions and used them for the service and betterment of others and this world. I'm not saying goodbye. I'm saying until next time. This is your host at Not Media, JP, signing off. Stay well, everyone.